March 2nd, 1953, 3 in the afternoon. Outside a locked bedroom door in the Kuntsevo dacha, Stalin's guards had been standing for over 12 hours. No sound, no movement, complete silence. Joseph Stalin, the man who ruled the Soviet Union with absolute terror, who signed death warrants for millions, might be dying behind that door. And not one guard dared knock. One man's hand trembled near the doorknob. In his pocket, a gold watch ticked steadily, engraved with Cyrillic letters, a gift from Stalin himself. His mind calculated, wake him and you're executed for disturbing the leader. Don't wake him and you're executed for negligence. Another guard whispered, "What if he's—" "Don't say it." The watch kept ticking. Outside, the most powerful dictatorship in the world ran on schedules and orders. Inside that room, time had stopped. What could make trained security officers wait 12 hours while their leader possibly died? The answer reveals how a system of terror destroyed its own creator. Understanding that paralysis requires going back decades, the 1930s and 1940s built the machine that would malfunction in 1953. Stalin's rise to absolute power came through systematic elimination. Trotsky, exiled then assassinated in Mexico. Bukharin, show trial, execution. Army generals, mass purges in 1937, thousands shot. The Great Terror consumed party members, intellectuals, ordinary citizens. Estimates, 750,000 executions, millions to gulags. The system ran on fear. Kuntsevo dacha, Stalin's personal residence outside Moscow, operated under strict protocols. Guards were hand-picked, trained in one principle: never disturb Comrade Stalin. Ever. Silence equals survival. Stalin rewarded loyalty with gifts, sometimes gold pocket watches, engraved personally. Each gift carried weight. It meant you were favored. It also meant you owed everything. One mistake erased you from existence, not just you, your family too. Photographs were edited, names disappeared from records. The terror was efficient, absolute, and everyone understood. Hesitation meant suspicion, and suspicion meant death. The guards learned their roles perfectly. Even Stalin's inner circle lived in terror. Lavrenti Beria headed the secret police, NKVD, then MGB. Georgy Malenkov served as deputy premier. Nikita Khrushchev ran the party apparatus. These men wielded enormous power, yet walked on knives. February 1953 brought fresh paranoia. The doctor's plot. Stalin accused prominent physicians, mostly Jewish, of poisoning Soviet leaders. Show trials were prepared. The inner circle recognized the pattern. Purges always started somewhere before consuming everyone. They watched each other, calculated odds, prepared for elimination. At the dacha, Stalin kept late hours. Evening movies, drinking sessions, rambling conversations until 4 or 5 in the morning. Then, dismissal. Guards took positions. The pattern was rigid. Stalin woke around 11, called for tea, began his day. The guards knew the rhythm intimately. Beria and others knew it too. Everyone orbited Stalin's schedule, his moods, his whims. The pocket watches given to loyal guards became symbols. The recipients checked them constantly, measuring time until the next potential disaster. Power meant nothing. Proximity to Stalin meant everything, and terror. The night of March 1st, 1953, followed the familiar pattern. Stalin watched a movie with Beria, Malenkov, Khrushchev, and Bulganin. They drank, talked, laughed when Stalin laughed, agreed when Stalin spoke. Around 4 in the morning, Stalin dismissed them. They left quickly, relieved. Guards moved into position outside Stalin's bedroom. Standard procedure. Morning would come. Stalin would wake near noon. The routine would continue. Except noon came and went. 1 p.m., 2 p.m. No bell, no call for tea, no sound at all. The guards shifted weight, uncomfortable. One checked his pocket watch, the gold one Stalin had given him 3 years earlier. The silence pressed down. Protocol was absolute. Never disturb Stalin. He'd had people shot for less. Maybe he was sleeping deeply. Maybe he'd been drinking more than usual. The guard wound his watch nervously, the mechanism clicking softly. 3 p.m. The other guards glanced at each other. Something was wrong, but admitting that meant making a decision. And decisions, in Stalin's world, got people killed. 4 p.m., 5 p.m. The nervousness became something else, genuine fear, but not of Stalin waking angry, fear of what the silence meant. Stalin always woke by noon, always. He maintained rigid schedules despite the late nights. He'd call for tea, for reports, for someone to yell at. The silence was unprecedented. Other staff began noticing. The housekeeper approached the guards, concerned. "Shouldn't someone check?" The senior guard shook his head firmly. "He's sleeping. Never disturb." But his own hand kept returning to its pocket watch, checking the time as if the watch might be lying. 4 hours past normal waking. 5 hours. 6. The dacha felt frozen. Then the housekeeper noticed something, a wet spot seeping under the door. Urine. She pointed, horrified. "He's hurt. He needs help." The guards looked. They saw. Medical training would recognize a stroke victim, loss of bladder control, extended unconsciousness. But they still didn't enter. The calculation remained. Stalin's wrath, if awakened unnecessarily, was certain and immediate. The possibility of a real emergency was just that, a possibility. And possibilities didn't outweigh certainties in Stalin's world. One guard said quietly, "We should call Moscow." That seemed safer. Pass the decision upward. Let someone with more authority take responsibility. They debated who to call. Beria ran security. Malenkov was deputy premier. Calling meant admitting something was wrong. But not calling meant the responsibility stayed with them. 6 p.m. The pocket watch ticked. 7 p.m. They made the call. The phone call to Moscow was carefully worded. "Comrade Stalin hasn't called for tea. Should we check on him?" Not, "We think he's hurt." Not, "There's an emergency." Just a question, deferential, leaving the decision to higher authority. Beria answered. His response, "Don't disturb him. Let him sleep." The guard felt relief wash over him. Decision made, not his responsibility anymore. He hung up and reported to the others. They waited. But Beria's response carried its own strange weight. Let him sleep implied normality. But Beria hadn't asked any questions, hadn't seemed concerned, had actually told them to continue waiting. In Moscow, Beria made calls to Malenkov and others, low conversations, careful words. The inner circle knew. And they didn't rush. 8 p.m., 9 p.m., 10 p.m. Guards still outside the door, staff gathering in hallways, whispering. The wet spot under the door had spread. Everyone could see it now. Everyone knew what it meant. But Beria's order stood. Don't disturb. The guard wound his pocket watch again, a nervous habit now. The mechanism was smooth, expensive, perfectly made. Stalin had handed it to him personally in 1950 after a security scare was handled well. Loyalty, Stalin had said, is remembered. The watch was proof, now that proof felt like a chain. The ticking seemed louder in the silence. Midnight approached. The phone rang. Beria and Malenkov were coming to the dacha. Finally. But they'd taken 4 hours. 4 hours after being notified that Stalin hadn't woken, hadn't called, hadn't moved. What were they doing during that time? The guards didn't speculate aloud. Speculation was dangerous. They waited. Beria and Malenkov arrived near midnight, 20 hours after Stalin would have normally woken. They didn't rush into the bedroom. They stood in the hallway talking quietly with the guards. "You're certain he hasn't called?" "Yes, certain." "And you haven't entered?" "No, never." "Good." The approval felt strange. They'd been right to wait, apparently. But wait for what? Beria walked to the door, listened. Nothing. He tried the handle, locked from inside, as always. Stalin locked his door every night. Paranoia was his default. Beria turned to the senior guard. "Open it." The guard hesitated. "I don't have a key. He locks it himself." Beria's eyes narrowed. "Then break it." Still the guard hesitated. Breaking Stalin's door felt like a line they couldn't cross. Malenkov intervened. "Just open it carefully. Check the lock." They examined the mechanism. Simple enough. They could force it without too much damage. But who would go first? Even now, with Beria standing there ordering it, no one wanted to be first through that door. Finally, the senior guard, the one with the pocket watch, stepped forward. He forced the lock. The door swung open. The smell hit first: urine, sweat, something sour. Then sight: Stalin on the floor beside his bed, lying in his own waste, unconscious. His right arm and leg were twisted oddly. His face sagged on one side. Stroke. Obvious, massive stroke. The guard checked his watch automatically. Nearly midnight, March 2nd. Stalin had collapsed sometime early March 1st, probably shortly after dismissing his inner circle. 20+ hours ago, 20 hours on the floor. The guard felt something crack inside, but his face showed nothing. They lifted Stalin carefully, moved him to the sofa in the next room. His body was heavy, awkward, helpless. The man who'd terrified millions couldn't control his own limbs. Beria immediately began searching, not for medical supplies, for documents. He went through Stalin's desk, his papers, checking what was there, what might need to disappear. Malenkov watched, said nothing. The guards watched both of them. Power was shifting in real time. Stalin's watch was still on his wrist, gold, expensive, still ticking. His pulse was there, weak, irregular, but there. Someone suggested calling doctors. Beria agreed, but slowly. He made the call himself, spoke carefully. Doctors would come, but not immediately, not rushing. There was discussion about which doctors. The best were in prison. Stalin had ordered them arrested in the doctor's plot just weeks earlier. The remaining doctors were terrified, less qualified, and very aware that treating Stalin was a death sentence if he died anyway. They'd be blamed. So even when doctors arrived, their treatment was minimal, hesitant, performative. One doctor later said, "We were afraid to treat him and afraid not to." Stalin's breathing was labored. His daughter Svetlana was called. She'd arrive soon. The inner circle positioned themselves. Khrushchev joined them. Conversations happened in corners, whispered, calculating. The guard with the pocket watch stayed at his post, but he wasn't guarding anymore. He was witnessing. The watch his leader had given him felt meaningless now. Stalin had created a system where loyalty meant paralysis, where fear prevented action, where even dying couldn't summon immediate help. The guard wound the watch again. Habit. The ticking continued. March 3rd brought more of the same. Doctors came and went, offering little. Stalin remained semi-conscious, unable to speak, right side completely paralyzed. Svetlana arrived, devastated, genuinely grieving. The contrast was sharp, her tears against the inner circle's political calculations. Beria alternated between jovial and grim, depending on whether Stalin showed signs of consciousness. When Stalin's eyes opened briefly, Beria became somber, concerned. When Stalin slipped back under, Beria relaxed, even joked. Everyone noticed. No one commented. The guards maintained their positions, but the structure was collapsing. Who were they guarding? Who were they obeying? The pocket watch kept marking hours. Medical records from those days show minimal intervention. Basic monitoring, fluids, but no aggressive treatment for a stroke victim. No one wanted responsibility. If Stalin recovered and remembered who'd made treatment decisions, that person might face consequences. If Stalin died during treatment, that person would definitely face consequences. So they did little. Let nature take its course. Let the stroke decide. Outside Moscow, the machinery of state continued. Pravda prepared statements. The Politburo met. But inside the dacha, time stretched. March 4th passed slowly. Stalin deteriorated further. Breathing became more difficult, more irregular. Beria had already begun releasing some prisoners from the Gulag system, moving fast to consolidate power and shift policy. Stalin was alive technically, but power had already moved on. The guard checked his watch less frequently now. The ticking just marked time passing, inevitable time, time that couldn't be stopped or reversed. 20 hours of waiting had turned into days. The initial paralysis had cascaded into systematic helplessness. The fear that had saved the guards had killed their leader. March 5th, 1953, evening. Stalin's breathing changed, slower, more labored, stopping and starting in irregular patterns. The doctors recognized the signs. The end was close. The inner circle gathered. Svetlana stayed by her father's side, holding his hand. Beria positioned himself prominently. Malenkov, Khrushchev, Bulganin, all present, all waiting. The guard with the pocket watch stood at his post. He'd been there in one shift or another for nearly 5 days. He pulled out the watch, checked the time, 9:30 p.m. Stalin's breathing rattled. His face had gone gray. 9:50 p.m. Joseph Stalin died. The doctors confirmed it. Svetlana wept. Beria immediately left the room, already making calls. Malenkov began organizing announcements. The system processed death as information to be managed. The guard stood there, watch in hand, and realized his paralysis on March 1st had contributed to this. Not alone. Everyone had contributed. The whole system had contributed. Stalin had built a machine so efficient at creating fear that even dying couldn't summon help in time. The guard had waited 12 hours before anyone entered that room. 12 hours while Stalin lay in his own waste, brain dying, stroke destroying what remained. The most powerful man in the Soviet Union had been killed by his own system. The watch kept ticking. March 6th, the state announced Stalin's death. Preparations began for a massive funeral. But quietly, questions circulated among the guards and staff. Why the delay? Why did no one enter for so long? Official accounts claimed Stalin had been found quickly, treated immediately, that everything possible was done. The guards knew better. They'd been there. They'd waited. They'd made the calls that weren't answered urgently. They'd watched the inner circle delay and calculate. But speaking truth meant contradiction of the official story. And contradicting the state, even Stalin's state, now led by others, remained dangerous. The senior guard was quietly reassigned. New post, different responsibilities. The pocket watch stayed with him, but he stopped winding it. Let it run down, stop. It felt appropriate. Beria's ascendancy was brief. By June, he'd overreached, been arrested himself, executed by December. The system consumed even its most ruthless operators. Khrushchev eventually emerged dominant, and years later, he denounced Stalin in a secret speech. But the full story of those 12 hours, the paralysis, the waiting, the fear that prevented action, that stayed buried. The guards carried it quietly. The watch stopped ticking. The memory didn't. Decades later, after the Soviet Union collapsed, some guards spoke carefully to historians. The story emerged in fragments, pieces assembled from testimonies, records, medical reports. The timeline became clear. Stalin collapsed early March 1st, probably around 6 a.m. He was found near midnight March 10th. 20 hours. The first calls to Moscow came around 7 p.m. March 1st, 12 hours already passed. Beria and Malenkov arrived 4 hours after that. Treatment was minimal, delayed, inadequate. The doctors were terrified. Everyone was terrified. That terror had calcified into paralysis. The senior guard, retired, gave one interview. He showed the pocket watch, gold, engraved, stopped at midnight March 2nd. He'd wound it that night, checking time as they finally entered the room, then never wound it again. "We were trained to obey absolutely," he said. "We obeyed absolutely. And it killed him." He paused. "But disobeying would have killed us." The interviewer asked if he felt guilty. The guard looked at the stopped watch. "Everyone feels guilty. Everyone was right to be afraid. That's what he built. A system where being right and being wrong both meant death. So we chose survival." The watch sat between them on the table, silent. The immediate aftermath saw rapid change. Beria released prisoners, loosened restrictions, positioned himself as reformer. But he'd moved too fast, threatened too many. His arrest came swiftly. The others, Malenkov, Khrushchev, Bulganin, carved up power more carefully. Stalin's body lay in state. Millions filed past. The funeral was enormous, crushing crowds. Dozens died in the press of people. But inside the dacha where he died, life continued quietly. New guards took posts, new routines established. The bloodstain where Stalin had lain was cleaned. The system continued, modified but recognizable. The cult of personality began dismantling, but slowly. Millions had died building Stalin's version of socialism. He'd died because that same system made helping him impossible. The moral calculus was exact. Fear defeated itself. No one learned the lesson completely. The watches kept ticking. History moved forward. The gold pocket watch sits in a drawer now in an apartment in Moscow. The guard who owned it died years ago. His family kept it, historical artifact, family story, reminder of something terrible. The engraving is still clear, Cyrillic letters spelling out loyalty and service, Stalin's signature underneath. The watch doesn't tick, hasn't ticked since March 2nd, 1953. It could be repaired, wound again, made to run. But the family leaves it silent. Some objects carry too much weight to function normally. Stalin built an empire on fear, ruled through terror, destroyed millions. In the end, that same terror destroyed him. 12 hours of paralysis, guards too frightened to knock, a system too efficient at preventing action. The watch stopped. The man died. The system took longer to collapse, but collapse it did. The watch stopped, the guard's son says, holding it carefully. The system took longer.